The year was 1941. Across the Pacific, thunder rolled above an empire on fire. After Pearl Harbor, America found itself in a race against time, a race not only to fight a war, but to survive it. Thousands of troops were being deployed to unfamiliar lands, humid jungles, storm-lashed islands, and deserts that scorched metal before noon. But while generals strategized over maps and weapons, a quieter battle was unfolding in the minds of engineers. The problem was simple, but deadly. How to keep men alive in places the earth itself seemed to reject them. Tents collapsed in typhoons. Wooden huts rotted in months. Insects, heat, and corrosion tore through supplies faster than bullets ever could. Soldiers slept soaked, sick, and sleepless, and morale began to rot faster than the wood beneath their boots. In Washington, urgency crackled like radio static. The U.S. Navy needed something new, something fast, something indestructible, a structure light enough to ship across oceans, strong enough to withstand cyclones, and simple enough that untrained soldiers could build it anywhere. And so, deep inside an old factory on the coast of Rhode Island, the challenge was issued. Engineers gathered in a warehouse filled with the echo of typewriters, drafting pencils, and distant waves. Among them were men who had built bridges and hangars, but none had ever been asked to design a building that could go to war. It wasn't about luxury. It wasn't even about comfort. It was about survival. That night, as the storm winds rattled the windows of the design shop, one engineer looked down at his sketch and whispered, almost to himself, "What if strength didn't come from resisting the storm, but from bending with it?" Outside, the world was changing, and so was the shape of shelter itself.
Winter 1941 bleeds into the spring of 1942. The United States military is swelling by the day, but one question keeps haunting the Army Corps of Engineers. How do you build a home that can travel with the war? At the Naval Construction Battalion Center in Davisville, Rhode Island, draftsmen and architects hunch over long tables covered in blueprints. The air smells of oil, pencil lead, and salt from the nearby bay. A clock ticks loudly, reminding them that every hour lost on paper means another soldier exposed to rain, rot, or heat halfway across the world. Chief Engineer Major Thomas G. Hill leads the team. His orders from Washington are as clear as they are impossible. Design a building that can be mass-produced, like ammunition, assembled by untrained hands, and survive anywhere on Earth. It must fit on a ship, be light enough to lift by hand, and strong enough to resist wind, bullets, and time itself. Hill knows the challenge borders on madness. "Gentlemen," he says during one late-night meeting, "we're not designing a house, we're designing a lifeboat for land." They start with the Nissen hut. Its curved steel ribs inspire something elegant, something aerodynamic that deflects the wind instead of fighting it. But the Nissen hut's flaws loom large. It's too heavy, too rigid, too hot. In tropical climates, it turns into a furnace. In Arctic wind, the metal plates freeze shut. So the Rhode Island engineers begin experimenting with a new material, corrugated galvanized steel. Light, cheap, nearly indestructible. They shape it into half-cylindrical panels and test them by hurling sandbags, water, and even debris from wind tunnels. When the curve bends, it doesn't break. It flexes and springs back. That's when they realize something profound. Survival isn't about standing tall. It's about yielding smartly. Still, there's another challenge. Steel conducts heat. Inside a tropical Quonset, the temperature could soar to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. The engineers need a lining, something that insulates without adding weight. They test plywood, fiberboard, and insulation paper, all under simulated tropical storms. Each failure brings them closer to an answer. Outside, the world is roaring forward. The Pacific is a graveyard of ships. Troops are stranded on islands with no shelter but the wreckage of supply crates. The pressure is immense. If these huts can't be built and shipped within weeks, entire battalions could perish from exposure alone. Hill's team works through nights, fueled by black coffee and desperation. One evening, while tracing the arc of a steel rib, a junior engineer named Robert McKee murmurs an idea. What if the structure builds itself? Everyone looks up. He explains, a modular frame bolted together, each piece identical, so there are no right or left parts, no tools beyond wrenches. A skeleton that grows as panels connect, snapping together like ribs. It's a radical thought, and it just might work. By early spring, a prototype stands in the Davisville yard. It's not beautiful, but it's perfect. A gleaming half-cylinder of corrugated steel, 16 feet wide, 36 feet long. Inside, it smells of fresh plywood and oil. Outside, it looks like a silver wave frozen mid-crest. The design is simple, functional, and strong. When the first storm test hits, rain slams against the steel like artillery, but the hut holds. Not a leak, not a buckle, just the low hum of wind curling over its rounded back. Major Hill exhales. We may have just built the first building that loves the storm. The Quonset hut is born, but the war is only getting started. Spring 1942. The prototype Quonset hut stands gleaming under the Rhode Island sun, but now comes the true test. Can it be built by men who have never held a wrench before? And can it be shipped halfway around the world without falling apart? The Navy gives its answer in the form of a single order. 20,000 huts, immediately. The Davisville factory transforms overnight. Conveyor belts rattle to life, presses stamp out ribbed steel panels by the thousands, and trains whistle through the night hauling shipments to the coast. What began as an engineer's experiment has become a national production line. The curved walls of Quonset huts roll out like armor plates for an army of builders. Each hut is broken down into sections. 16 steel ribs, corrugated panels, bolts, nuts, and plywood and walls. Everything fits into a single wooden crate, no bigger than a truck bed. On the box, stenciled in bold black letters, the name reads, Quonset Hut Type N. The name comes from the factory's birthplace, Quonset Point, Rhode Island. In the testing yard, teams of Seabees, construction battalion sailors, assemble a hut for the first time. They open the crates, read the blueprints, and stare in disbelief. No nails, no concrete, no instructions beyond a handful of diagrams. But then the pattern reveals itself. Each steel rib locks into another like vertebrae, each panel bolts cleanly into place. Within 8 hours, a bare patch of dirt becomes a shining, wind-proof shell. A storm rolls in off Narragansett Bay, testing their work before they even finish. The wind shrieks, rain lashes the metal skin. The men duck inside, expecting leaks, but the Quonset hut hums like a tuning fork, the wind sliding over it harmlessly. It's alive, bending with the weather, but never giving in. When the storm passes, they step outside and stare, awed. News spreads faster than the Atlantic wind. The huts can be built anywhere. Jungles, beaches, frozen tundra. They need no heavy tools, no blueprints, no engineers, just hands and determination. And because every piece is standardized, the huts can be expanded, linked together, or repaired using scraps from another. They are as flexible as the soldiers who live in them. By summer, convoys of ships loaded with Quonset huts leave American ports like silver lifeboats headed for chaos. Across the Pacific, on islands like Guadalcanal and Tarawa, Marines unload crates and begin to build. In the blistering sun and driving rain, they assemble shelter after shelter, sometimes in the middle of air raids. Within days, entire bases rise from the mud. Mess halls, barracks, hospitals, chapels, and workshops, all made from the same curved steel skin. War photographers capture the sight. Rows upon rows of half-moon huts stretching across jungles and beaches, their metallic arcs reflecting sunlight and smoke. They become a new symbol of the American presence, a machine-made village that breathes with the rhythm of war. But the pressure doesn't ease. Demand skyrockets. Commanders want bigger huts, wider spans, cooler interiors. Hill and his team push for new variations, some with insulation, others with windows, even versions strong enough to house machinery or store munitions. Every improvement meant another sleepless night in the factory. Back in Davisville, a new storm approaches, not of rain, but of exhaustion. The engineers are running out of time, metal, and manpower. Production lines operate 24 hours a day. Mistakes multiply, tempers flare, and the war grows hungrier with each passing week. Yet every morning, as the whistle blows and the steel sheets roar through the presses, the same mantra echoes through the plant. Keep bending, never breaking. Because now, the huts aren't just shelters, they are symbols of endurance in a world collapsing under fire. And somewhere in the Pacific, a young soldier lies awake beneath a curved roof, listening to the rain drumming above him, and for the first time in months, he feels safe.
Autumn 1943. The Pacific Warfront is now an archipelago of fire. Allied forces push island by island toward Japan, and everywhere they go, the silver arcs of Quonset huts follow. From Guadalcanal to Bougainville, the huts stand shoulder to shoulder with men. Enduring monsoons, earthquakes, and bomb blasts, they've become more than shelters. They're part of the soldier's identity, their shield against an unrelenting world. But now, the huts face their greatest test. On the island of Espiritu Santo in the New Hebrides, a typhoon is coming, one of the worst in recorded Pacific history. Barometers drop, radio signals fade, and the sea turns the color of slate. The island's naval base houses nearly 10,000 troops, and every one of them depends on those curved shells of steel. Major Thomas Hill, now overseeing production from the mainland, listens to the radio reports with a sick feeling in his stomach. His design was meant to bend, not break, but no storm has ever tested them like this. If they fail, he whispers to his assistant, we lose more than structures. We lose faith. As night falls, the typhoon slammed into Espiritu Santo with winds exceeding 150 miles per hour. Trees snap like matchsticks. The ocean swallows landing craft whole. Across the base, Quonset huts groan, their steel ribs flexing and shuddering under the force. Inside, soldiers huddle in the dim light of oil lamps, listening to the roar of wind that sounds like artillery. The ground floods, the air howls, and then the power goes out. Hours crawl by. Rain pierces through seams. Metal creaks. Bolts strain, but the huts hold. One collapses, then another, but hundreds more stay standing, bending as the wind screams over their rounded backs. When dawn finally breaks, the base looks battered but alive. Mud covers everything, but the huts remain, silver silhouettes against a bruised sky. Word spreads fast, through telegrams, through radio chatter, through the exhausted voices of men who have just survived hell. The huts held. In Washington, Hill received the report and closes his eyes in relief. The Quonset design has passed the ultimate trial, not in the calm of a testing ground, but in the chaos of real war. His team celebrates quietly, too tired to cheer. It wasn't beauty that saved them, Hill says softly. It was the curve. Soon the Quonset hut becomes more than a temporary solution. Engineers modify the design for hospitals, command posts, and even aircraft hangars. Variants stretch over 100 feet wide. Some are camouflaged with jungle foliage. Others gleam in the sun like silver armor. The same principles, strength through flexibility, simplicity through symmetry, carry them forward. But the true climax isn't in the metal or the math. It's in what those huts come to represent. The triumph of human ingenuity over impossible odds. On battlefields where everything else breaks, they endure. Where men lose hope, they offer safety. In a war defined by destruction, the Quonset hut becomes a quiet symbol of creation. When the last reports from Espiritu Santo reach Rhode Island, one message stands out, scribbled in a tired commander's handwriting. Your huts didn't just survive the storm, they outlasted it. The tide of war begins to turn. Allied victories ripple across the Pacific, and with every step forward, more Quonset huts rise from the mud, the coral, and the ashes. They've become the backbone of every military outpost, the quiet companions of men too tired to dream. Where flags are raised, huts stand nearby, silver witnesses to triumph and loss alike. In photographs wired back to the States, Americans see rows of gleaming arcs stretching to the horizon, thousands of them lined like armored waves against the jungle. The public doesn't yet know their name, but every soldier does. To them, it's simple: home. At Guadalcanal, a chaplain gives sermons inside one. At Saipan, wounded men recover under its curved ribs. In New Guinea, mechanics rebuild plane engines beneath its arched roof while the rain drummed above them like an old hymn. Each hut hums with life. Letters written home, jokes whispered by candlelight, boots drying by stoves. Amid a war of chaos and ruin, these humble steel shells become sanctuaries of order. Reporters who visit the Pacific begin writing about the miracle huts. Time magazine calls them a portable miracle of American engineering. Life magazine photographs a nurse leaning against one, smiling despite the distant thunder. The Quonset hut becomes a symbol not just of function, but of endurance. The idea that ingenuity can protect humanity from the worst the world can offer. Back in Davisville, the factory workers are exhausted. They've built over 100,000 huts, an endless ocean of steel. Many of them have never seen the front lines, but they know what their hands have built. They know those curved walls have kept men alive in storms and firefights, through disease and fear. When the whistle blows for the final shift of 1944, silence fills the plant. For the first time in years, there's no rush order. Just pride and exhaustion and the hum of machinery coming to rest. When the war finally ends in 1945, the world begins to change again. Soldiers come home, but the Quonset huts remain, thousands of them scattered across islands, beaches, and airfields. And in that strange quiet after victory, people look at them differently. The same huts that shielded soldiers from war now shelter refugees, families, and farmers. On devastated islands, villagers repurpose them into homes and schools. In Europe, they become bakeries, hospitals, even churches. The curb that once deflected bullets now shelters prayers. From Okinawa to Oxford, from Manila to Minnesota, the Quonset hut transcends its purpose. It's no longer just military hardware. It's a new kind of architecture, a structure that belongs to everyone. And in that transformation, the engineers' legacy grows. They hadn't just solved the wartime problem. They'd created a blueprint for survival that would outlive the war itself. Major Hill receives letters from across the world. One from a soldier in Guam reads, "Sir, I don't know much about design, but I know your building kept me dry through 2 typhoons and 1 bombing raid. That's more than I can say for most generals." Hill smiles when he reads it. For all the equations and sleepless nights, this was the only proof that mattered. The war was over, but the huts, those simple steel crescents, had already begun their second life. The world is rebuilding. The sound of hammers and saws replaces the thunder of artillery, and among the ruins, one shape keeps reappearing: the curve of the Quonset hut. What began as a temporary shelter for war has quietly become the foundation for peace. Across Europe and Asia, entire communities rise beneath those arching ribs of steel. In England, students attend makeshift universities under Quonset roofs. In the Philippines, fishermen store their boats in them. In America, veterans returning home buy surplus huts from the government for $50 apiece. They set them up in open fields, turning them into homes, workshops, and diners. The huts that once guarded soldiers' lives now help them rebuild their futures. Journalists begin calling it the architecture of resilience. Architects study its perfect curve, half circle, half symbol, and realize it represents something more than efficiency. It's the shape of endurance, the strength of simplicity, the quiet genius of form meeting function. Major Hill, now retired, visits Davisville one last time. The factory is silent, its machines resting under a layer of dust. He walks past the old assembly lines where sparks once flew, where coffee cups sat beside blueprints, where men and women worked through the night to save lives they'd never see. On a wall still hangs the first blueprint of the Quonset hut, the curve that changed everything. He runs his hand over the paper, faded and brittle now. He says softly, "We didn't build monuments, we built lifeboats." Decades pass. The world forgets the names of the engineers, but their design remains everywhere. On Arctic research stations, on tropical islands, in deserts, and even at Antarctic bases, there stand Quonset descendants, weathering storms, just as they did in 1943. Their curved silhouettes appear in black and white war photos and modern satellite images alike, bridging eras like steel echoes of survival. Architects and historians call them primitive. Soldiers and builders call them genius. But to those who lived beneath their roofs, to the medics, the pilots, the engineers, the wounded, the weary, they were something deeper. They were safe. In 1950, a young veteran turned architect named William Crissell gives a lecture at MIT. He shows a picture of a Quonset hut still standing on Okinawa, battered but whole, and tells his students, this isn't just design. It's proof that necessity can create beauty. The audience falls silent, realizing they're not just looking at a war relic, they're looking at a symbol of human adaptability. Today, more than 80 years later, many Quonset huts still stand. Some house museums, others remain homes, workshops, or art studios. Their steel may be rusted, their bolts corroded, But their purpose has not faded. They endure, just as they were built to. And when the wind rises and the rain begins to fall, those curved roofs sing the same low metallic hum they did in 1943, a song not of war, but of survival. Because in the end, the genius of the Quonset hut wasn't that it defied nature, it learned to live with it.